Welcome to Carbon Clarity, the podcast for the carbon curious. I'm your host, Kev Cooling, founder and MD of Hut22 Limited, and today I'm very excited to be joined by Nigel Banks, Technical Director at Octopus Energy. Welcome, Nigel.
Hi Kev, great to be here.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you very much for coming on. It's brilliant to be speaking to you. So, as ever, with all my guests, what I start with is a bit of a potted history of you, how you got to where you are, and anything else you might want to tell us.
Okay, great. Yeah. So obviously we worked together at AECOM some time ago,
We
and
did?
I started my career when it was Oscar Faber before it became AECOM.
Yeah.
So I had an interest in sort of technical engineering, maths at school, and actually went at age 15 to go and work at Oscar Faber and work experience. And through Neil Burns and Ant Wilson, worked in Ant Wilson's applied research team there,
Yeah.
and then followed that through school, through university, and started working at what became Faber Maltzel and AECOM, and worked on some fantastic projects with some great people and learned a huge amount there. And we're creating a great team up in Leeds, where I now live and still live up here in Yorkshire, at AECOM. But got a bit frustrated with some of the sort of big mega projects in the Middle East. So wanted to do something closer to home, family, young family, and went to a local house build, well, a national house builder and contractor called Keepmoat,
Yep.
who were building some of the projects we were designing at AECOM. So went to help them do a lot of home retrofit, a lot of social housing retrofit. And then from there, in 2015, there was the cut the green crap, that all the energy incentives and the code for stable homes got cut by the new
Yeah.
Conservative government.
Yes, it did.
And that put paid to a lot of the, well, it really shrunk the market in where we were doing. So we looked at what new interesting things we could look at, and we looked at, could we fit smart meters, could we fit solar and battery systems, and could we do modular housing? And I led a team to sort of trial whether there was a potential for modular housing, and that turned into Ilka Homes, who
Yeah.
then grew into quite a large business until that unfortunately came to a bit of an end, well, to an unfortunate end, and went into administration in the summer of 23. But we were doing some great stuff there. We were building very high quality homes at an incredible pace. We were building a house every 45 minutes out of the factory,
Wow, it's
and
incredible.
we had 1,250 people across the business, and we were building zero bills homes, and we'd create something with Octopus Energy, and I'd led the Ilka Home side of that. And then when Ilka went under, I went and joined the Octopus team to try and help scale up and grow that. And that's what I do now. So I now work with
Fantastic.
house builders across the country and around the world. I'll perhaps get onto that, where we're looking to roll out zero bills as the new standard for house building around the world.
Amazing. I mean, that's quite the journey. It's kind of it's nice that it sort of starts from a really engineering first principles kind of basis, and really understanding what it is that where your energy use is in your home and that kind of thing. And it was interesting actually that at Ilka you developed the zero bills thing in association with Octopus then. Is that right?
Yeah, so it came about where we were developing a sort of zero carbon strategy. How could we build to a lower carbon standard? We had a low embodied carbon product. We had some clients wanting to go to sort of a zero carbon standard, and we wanted to do that on every project.
Yeah.
And we were trying to work out a way of making that more appealing. And our CEO Giles Carter met with Greg Jackson, the CEO of Octopus, at an event, and got chatting. And Giles came back and said, "Zero carbon's great, but do you reckon we could get to zero bills?" And I went, that sounds like quite a challenge, and went away, ran some numbers, and looked at what Octopus were doing. And they had a Tesla tariff at the time that paid the same rate for import as export if you had a Tesla battery.
Wow.
Ran the numbers and said, well, if we could generate about 20% more energy than the houses like to use, then you would effectively get to a zero bill. And we discussed that with Octopus and the team there. Michael Cottrell was the lead at the time, and who became my boss at Octopus. And yeah, we worked out we could do it. And then what Octopus said was, we won't just get to a zero bill in theory, we'll guarantee it. So we will guarantee those households have no energy bills. And it started off with a 5-year guarantee. We've now extended that out to at least 10 years of guaranteed zero
Wow,
energy
that's
bills
amazing.
in the home. And yeah, we're now scaling it up in the UK. We've also started, Octopus is now a massive energy company, not just in
Yeah.
the UK, but globally. And so we're actually rolling out into all the different countries that Octopus works in. So we're live in Germany, we're live in New Zealand. We'll hopefully be live in France and Spain and other countries later this year. So yeah, quite exciting journey on.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And for you then, it seems like beyond AECOM, I guess, beyond that kind of, Faber Mortsel period, you've always kind of worked in residential development. So is that because it just particularly interests you, or is that kind of just, where life's taking you? Or
I think I got very frustrated with there was one particular project, which was a massive hospital in the desert. That was a glass box in the desert, which I wasn't overly keen on demonstrating that it was a LEED platinum building or whatever it was, LEED silver building. And I thought, yeah, that isn't really what I want to be working on. And some of the stuff that KeepMoat was doing was really interesting in terms of social housing retrofit, and tackling fuel poverty. We actually set up and ran a project called Warm Homes Oldham when I was at KeepMoat with the local NHS and the local public health board, really focusing on health impacts, and really brought home the impact you can make. And from that, and the other thing which has been interesting is it's often the same technologies, it's often the same solutions that work in homes, that work in new homes that you can then take into retrofit.
Right.
So actually a lot of what we were doing was actually the homes that we designed at AECOM that KeepMoat have built. We were then saying, well, how can we use those same technologies in homes, in existing homes? So we built the first 101 of the first 120 zero carbon co-level 6 homes that were designed at AECOM and then built by KeepMoat. And we built some of the first passive house schemes as well through KeepMoat. And so trying to look at those technologies and how do we apply that into existing homes, and did a lot of interesting work through the technology strategy board at the time, did a retrofit for the future competition, and we got 3 of the best 4 performing homes in that out of 120 homes, and really learned a lot about what works, what doesn't work. And also the really interesting thing about KeepMoat was their ability to deliver at scale cost effectively. So they were their business grew through replacing kitchens and bathrooms in social housing, and they would operate on a model of delivering 5 or 10 homes every week. So in the morning, electrician would do some initial electric works, and then in the afternoon they go to the house 10 doors down the road and finish them off. And they'd operate in this cycle,
really nice
in and out really consistently, really efficiently. And we tried to take that into retrofit and did a huge amount of solar PV install work through the feed-in tariff when that was around. Quite a lot of external wall insulation to non-traditionally built homes which had no insulation in the walls, a lot of the concrete homes built in the 50s and 60s, and really some massive transformational projects. So that was very interesting, and certainly that remains an interest around the sort of tackling fuel poverty or tackling poverty more generally. And homes are fascinating, and you can bring it to home, do your own home. I've done 2 or 3 homes that I've done retrofits on, and that's really brought me into sort of thinking about what's the best way of doing it. And I think my thought process has evolved quite a lot over the last 5-10 years, and certainly being Octopus, understanding how the technology can play a key role has been really interesting.
Yeah, there's certainly a received wisdom in that kind of space, isn't there? There's certainly a kind of I think as practitioners, a lot of the time people, they kind of absorb the received wisdom on that topic, don't they? About which elements of energy consumption are important. Is it your energy efficient equipment? Is it the fabric measures, is it infiltration? What is it that's important? Without perhaps interrogating it really, really closely. But it sounds like you've had the opportunity to do that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think, look, we did some great projects initially with solar PV, but they were quite expensive at the time. And when we were first installing solar PV in 2012. 2011, I think we were installing 200 watt panels that cost something like £500 each. You can now buy a panel that's twice as efficient for a tenth of the price. So
it's amazing. It's such transformational, isn't it?
So it's a 440 watt panels, like under £50 now. It is extraordinary, the cost reduction that's happened in that technology. But also the cost reduction that's happening in batteries is the other key technology. And that's happened at the same time as we've massively started to decarbonise the grid and put much more flexible renewable energy onto the grid. So the whole electricity grid has transformed, or is in the middle of going through this transformation. In fact, in some ways, it's only at the start. So we've gone from having 40% coal back in 2012 in a very high carbon grid to no coal on the grid now. All the coal-fired power stations turned off, and we've gone from 500 grams of carbon to 125 last year. And hopefully by 2030 we'll be at zero. And at that point, when you use your energy becomes really important, both from a carbon intensity point of view, but also from a cost point of view. And I think it's one of the things that a lot of people, even who work in the energy sector and the building design sector, really have no idea that the cost of energy varies massively through the day. So if you've got maybe those who've got an electric car and they're on our Intelligent Octopus Go tariff that's 7p at night, then
very nice.
They know that energy can be cheap at night. But some people are on our Agile tariff, which follows the market. And people on that tariff can see that when it's windy, like it is extremely windy today, the cost of energy will drop to a very low level, sometimes even go negative. So you get paid to use energy in your home on our tariff. And then at other times, the cost of energy is very high. And if you're exporting that energy, you get paid a lot more to export it in those evening peak times. So understanding how and when you use energy becomes, I was going to say, almost as important as how much you use. And in some cases, you're almost incentivized to use more energy because there's excess available. So that really flips on its head the thought process of priority number one is reduced demand, because at times there is excess electricity available on the grid, and if you on the right tariff, you can use that energy and even get paid to use that energy. And that really is a real mental shift in how you think about energy. And that is, as we build more and more wind, particularly whenever it's windy, the cost of energy should be very, very low. And it is low overall, but in the UK we have a single national electricity price, and one of the things that Octopus has been pushing for, and a lot of other consultancies that look at the energy market, is to have more of a location or regional price. And that would mean Scotland, northeast of England, anywhere that's got large amounts of winds coming on would get some of the cheapest energy in all of Europe, whereas currently we have the most expensive electricity in the world in some cases. So the opportunity to with a bit of reform to really unlock that is significant, and that's really exciting around where that can go. Already the opportunity is there, but we could really turbocharge that. And it's one of the things that Greg Jackson's really inspirational around, is for people to get on the sort of journey to decarbonize, they need to see the financial benefit. And that's how Zero Bills came about, really, because people are me and you might be interested, and maybe a lot of your listeners
right.
Zero carbon.
I mean, it's kind of preaching to converted, isn't it, talking to us lot? But yeah, absolutely, your average person on the street probably isn't that interested in carbon, but what they are interested in is how much is in their back pocket, right?
Absolutely. And that's how Zero Bills came about, and that's the real message there is, if you can excite people and almost do zero carbon in disguise, that's when you get a fantastic game-changing technology. And we've seen that with electric cars, that what Tesla have done is, and Elon Musk to one side, what the car and the technology has done has created a fantastic experience in driving it, and it feels like you're in a massively upgraded car to a petrol car. Better to drive, faster to drive, more responsive. All the technology is built into the car, and now they're becoming same price or even cheaper, coming forward with Chinese cars. Then people are going to move to it, and that's where we've got to get to with heat pumps and with solar battery systems. They need to be cost effective. They need to be an upgrade in your system, and with Zero Bills, we can show with this technology you can get an upgraded house to the point where you don't have to pay for energy.
So just on Zero Bills then, I guess that in order for a house to kind of qualify for Zero Bills, if that's the right terminology, what does it need to do? Does it need to meet certain standards? Let's think about new build for a second. Does it need to meet a certain standard? Is it the case that Octopus have to be involved in the design and the delivery of those buildings, or can anybody with a new build apply for it? How does that work?
So effectively, it's a tariff that we offer. So it's a tariff that is available for homes that qualify and are accredited by Octopus. So we have an accreditation process similar to, I guess, a SAP or a PHPP type accreditation process, where we work with the house builder.
Which are some of those processes that SAP people have to go through as part of sort of building regulations, and PHPP might be for passive house or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, acronym crazy. But So actually, we take the data from the energy calculations from SAP or PHPP on expected
Yep.
heating of water, and we look at the size and number of bedrooms of the house and how much electricity those homes will generally consume, and we assess the size of solar and battery system that's required for the home to be accredited for zero bills. So, and then we confirm that and agree that in a contract with the house builder that if they build to that spec, we will guarantee that home 10 years of zero bills. So there are a few key points on it that we do not allow any gas, so no gas to the connection to the house. So it's an all electric home. It needs an electric heating system, ideally a heat pump, because it makes it a lot more efficient than any sort of direct electrical system. And then we need a lot of solar. So typically we have a solar roof rather than a concrete tile roof.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so you need to kind of max out the solar, I guess. So I've my house, I've got solar on my house, but it's kind of an odd shaped roof. So it's definitely less than ideal. But presumably you're looking for homes which are really kind of optimized in terms of orientation, the way the roof is planned. Does that matter, or is there a bit more flexibility? So, I'm thinking for a development of zero bills homes, are they all going to be kind of regimented ranks facing the same direction, or is it not like that?
It's not like that. And one of the amazing things we discovered that we weren't aware of, that is, if you put solar panels on both sides of the roof in the UK and actually across most of Europe, and the roof's a typical pitch of 30 to 40 degrees, you get almost exactly the same amount of solar generation, whichever way they face. So if you face them east-west, or you face them north-south, or any angle in between, you'll get almost identical, almost within a couple of percent annual generation. So actually, if you can get an even number of panels on the roof, on both sides of the roof, you can face it any way you want. So actually, urban design and orientation doesn't make a difference.
What even north?
Even north. Yeah. So north and south will generate the same.
Because in the summer you're getting a little bit of something, are you, in the morning and evening, perhaps?
Exactly.
Okay.
And actually, you get about 50% of what you get on a south-facing roof on a north-facing roof.
Really? That's amazing.
It's more than most people think. But when you do the analysis and when you model it and when you see the homes in reality, that's what you get. So yeah, because a lot of the time it's actually daylight rather than sunlight that's generating background energy.
Absolutely. That's a misconception, isn't it? That people think they only generate when the sun is shining, and that's bright clear skies. That's not true.
It can work. So that's a big difference. The bits that come challenging is if you have a hipped roof where effectively all the sides come in and you've got triangular shaped roofs. That doesn't work so well with rectangular panels.
Right, exactly.
And then if you have dormer windows or rooms in the roof with, they could be challenging because you can't put the solar panels where the dormer windows are. So we have got sites where 100% of the homes are zero bills, and they are a mixture of sort of bungalows, 1 bed, 2 bed, 3 bed, up to sort of 5 bed detached houses with different roof forms and shapes. But and we have a little bit of flexibility of some homes be a little bit under and some can be a little bit over. But there are some houses where we just can't get them to work, and that's generally where the roofs you can't get enough panels on the roof. That's usually the technical constraining factor.
And you're normally matching the panels with a battery, or okay.
So we have a home battery, typically about 13.5 kilowatt hour. So a Tesla Powerwall 3 or a Give Energy all in one. We work with there's 5 different battery brands, there's 3 different heat pump brands, and there's more coming that we've built the intelligent controls into. So for the householder, they sign up to the tariff and live their life normally, set the thermostat on the wall or in the app, and just live normally. And then we will smart control and optimize when to discharge the battery, when to potentially run the hot water cycle, and maybe we might run the heating an hour earlier than if you said you want your house at 21 degrees at 6 in the afternoon, we might run the heating at between 3 and 4 rather than from 5 till 6 because of the cost of energy,
because of the demand on the grid and stuff. Yeah. Okay,
exactly. And then there is a fair use allowance. Is a key point to flag. It's not limitless free energy. So if you've got a hot tub in the garden or that sort of thing, then you're going to go over the fair use limit. And actually, we're advising against some of those very high use devices in the home. But it's set at double typical consumption, so it's a pretty generous.
It's pretty generous, isn't it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And the kind of way the business model for Octopus is that the home is generating more energy than it needs over the course of the year, and therefore you're selling that energy onto the wholesale market. Are you? Is that how that works?
Exactly, yeah. So you don't get the householder pays nothing for energy they import, but they don't get paid for energy they export. So we take
Right.
that export revenue
Yeah.
and any revenues we generate from the grid in optimizing the batteries and the heat pumps, and we can still make a profit without charging the customer anything for their energy.
It's amazing.
So we think it's pretty transformational, and it showcases what can be done in
Yeah.
with the technologies that are now much more cost effective than they used to be. But it is still an upfront cost, and that is an interesting challenge for house builders. Culturally, that's not their natural place to go, is
Yes.
spending more money on kit upgrades. But what we are starting to see is the house builders are recovering those costs, in some cases recovering those costs and making a little bit more money.
In terms of the sale price of the
in
house.
the sale price.
And do you work with specific, house builders who want to get involved in this at the moment, or how does that work? You have a few that you work with regularly, or?
So we've worked with a number of the major national house builders. We've done homes with Bellway and Persimmon.
Right. Okay.
But what we'd say is that some of the smaller builders and some of the more sort of entrepreneurial, sort of individual owned businesses have been fast to get going. So we've done a lot with Hill Group, a lot with Thacum, smaller companies like Verto and GSA, where they've got sort of driven individuals leading at the top. That's how we're going to do it. That sounds great, and that's where we've got a lot of the initial sites through.
Brilliant.
But we're trying to say this is something that we think should work on all homes coming forward. And
I can't see why it wouldn't.
It works brilliantly in build to rent as well. They can effectively make the homes bills inclusive for rent. So we're working with a lot of the big single family home rental companies like Lloyd's Living or Citra, Package Living, which is backed by Aviva, and they're looking to do this with their homes for rent as well.
And if one of the big kind of new, I'm doing air quotes, one of the big kind of new demands on home energy systems are electric vehicles that you mentioned before. Yep. So does it still work if somebody's got an EV that they want to be charging at home?
Yeah, so electric vehicles almost double the electricity consumption of a home.
Right.
So currently we've excluded electric vehicle charging from the zero bills tariff, but they would go on our Intelligent Octopus Go for that EV charging. So that works out at typically currently it's about 7p a kilowatt hour, which
which is still pretty cheap, right?
Yeah. Which again, people who don't drive electric cars won't realise that if you can charge at that sort of rate, you can do 10,000 miles for £200.
It is crazy. The difference in the cost of the tariff makes such a difference to your cost of driving.
Than petrol or diesel. So it's super cheap charging. We are looking at that actually because there are some homes where we could get enough solar on the roof that would actually enable us to include the EV charging. But yeah, currently we don't in the UK. We'll sub-bill that element.
What's the average? I guess you must know this. What's the average energy bill for a UK home? Because how much is this actually going to save people every year, do we think?
Obviously it's been very high last couple of years. This year the typical bill is about £1,700. That's the median, not the mean though. The mean is near sort of two and a bit £1,000. Obviously varies a lot with occupancy and varies a lot with size of property as well.
It's a decent chunk of money though, isn't it?
Yeah. So against an existing home, you're typically saving £2,000 to £3,000 a year on a 3-4 bedroom home. But interestingly, even on a new home, you're still saving £2,000 to £3,000 a year. So we've looked at the data on EPC A rated or B rated new homes, and they are better than E and F rated homes, but only by about 25%. And that's because
and the spread on the EPC would suggest it's probably a bit more than that, but at 25% it's not huge, is it?
Yeah, and that's because you've got standing charges, which is a good chunk of the bill.
Yes.
And then your electricity consumption from your appliances is the same typically in an existing home or a new home. People have got the same computers, the same dishwashers. You might have slightly older appliances in older homes, but often people bring their appliances with them in new homes. And hot water usage is pretty similar as well.
Yeah.
So actually, the EPC is really showcasing the difference in heating and heating energy. But in a new build home, that's typically only a fifth of the energy bill is heating.
Yeah.
A fifth is heating, a fifth is hot water, and 3/5 is appliance use in a typical home. So actually going much further with the insulation, and this is some of the stuff we've looked at on retrofit as well, and wrote an article on this called Fabric Fifth rather than Fabric First, which got a bit of attention last year. That actually I think you do get to a point of diminishing returns with fabric interventions. We definitely need to improve a huge amount of the stock in the UK.
Yeah.
But there is a point where putting 300 millimeters of external wall insulation on a home rather than 200 millimeters of external wall insulation doesn't make a lot of sense, and actually has higher embodied carbon.
I was going to say,
that sort of
yeah,
thing.
that's absolutely right. It's because, operational energy use, the stuff you use once the building's up and running, is only part of the equation, really, isn't it? And embodied carbon is, and as of course we continue to decarbonize the grid, the embodied carbon are those materials which are often not coming from the UK, they're coming from abroad, where perhaps they don't have such a decarbonized grid, and the transport and everything. Suddenly, actually, embodied carbon becomes a really significant thing, doesn't it? That's fantastic. So just let's just talk for a second about Fabric Fifth. Just run us through that. That's slightly, dare I say, I don't know if I could say it goes as far as say controversial, but thought provoking piece.
Yeah, it was. I'd say it was deliberately aimed to be thought provoking, because I think I was definitely in the mentality that Fabric First was the mantra and was always right.
I mean, yeah.
And it was, and it's designed to. The article was designed to provoke thought and get people thinking and running their own numbers, so they could actually say, is that the right solution in all cases? Yeah. And it came about off the back of seeing some of the recent retrofit projects funded through government programs where 70,000-80,000 pounds is being spent in doing external wall insulation, digging out down to the foundations and insulating below ground to do the floor.
Okay. Wow.
And they left the gas boiler in place. And I'm thinking,
you spent
£80,000 and you haven't actually decarbonised the house.
So you reduce the energy consumption, sure.
You reduce, massively reduce the energy consumption, and from a fuel poverty point of view, you are reducing the bill by maybe 20%, 25%.
Yeah.
But actually, you spent £80,000 doing that, and quite a lot of embodied carbon. And actually, is that the right way of doing things, or is there a different order in which, from a decarbonisation point of view, we should be thinking about these measures? So it's largely around deep fabric retrofit, and where does that fit in the agenda for typical homes? And in some homes, you need that external wall insulation or internal wall insulation because they are absolute sieves of a home, and it makes sense from a poverty point of view, from being able to get some comfort in those homes. But for many homes, that probably isn't the place to start, and then so fabric ends up being.
I was going to say, so what's 1, 2, 3, 4?
So 1, 2, and 3 are heat pump, smart control, and basic measures, draft proofing, lofts and cavities. I put heat pump first because there are some homes, and we see this, or at Octopus, we install a lot of heat pumps. Some customers, if you say you have to do your loft insulation or you have to do your cavity wall insulation before you fit your heat pump, won't fit the heat pump. They'll fit another gas boiler, and you've lost them for another 10 years.
10 or 15 years. So and also the government grants to support heat pumps. I don't even know if they're still around at the moment, are they?
Yeah.
But when we had ours fitted, the guy came around and inspected and made sure we had enough loft insulation, we had our cavity walls filled and all that kind of thing. It was a prerequisite to getting that grant.
It was a prerequisite, and it was actually stopping some customers going ahead because they had lots of stuff in the loft, and the thought of emptying the loft in order to change their boiler was just a non-starter. So it's actually a discussion point around, or they had to wait 3 months to get cavity wall insulation done, which means they just fit the gas boiler. So the government has changed that rules. That the £7,500 grant is still available, and you can get a heat pump from Octopus from £500.
I mean, I didn't get as big a grant as that, and I'm very put out about it. But anyway, carry on.
So so you can get your heat pump fitted, and if you combine a heat pump with a smart tariff, so we have smart tariffs for heat pumps. Typically, people on our smart tariffs for heat pumps are saving about £200-300 a year against a gas boiler. If your heat pump is installed badly and running inefficiently, it can be more expensive than a gas boiler to run. But if it's installed well and is on a smart tariff that is using that best time of day, you can make significant savings against a gas boiler. And if you're only paying £500 for it, potentially it's cheaper to install than a gas boiler.
Right, yeah, so it's certainly comparable.
Yeah, and if you can do the basic measures of lofts, cavity, draft proofing, that all makes sense. And we're not saying don't do that, but don't let that be a reason to stop you getting a heat pump. And then the one
that's 1, 2, and 3.
That's 1, 2, and 3. The one that's most controversial, I think, was I put solar battery systems ahead of deep fabric retrofits. So solar and battery systems, you can install quite large solar and battery systems for under £10,000 now, and they will slash your electricity bill. And if you've got a heat pump, your entire energy bill by some cases 50%, some cases 100%. That's effectively how we get to zero bills for £10,000 versus spending £50,000 to save 20% on your
Yeah.
bill. So actually,
And then last and least is fabric.
last but not least,
Okay.
is deep fabric retrofit, and there definitely is a role for it. There's a role for it in tackling poverty. There's a role for it in improving the comfort of some homes. But I think a lot of people go to it first and don't think of those other things. And that was the reason was to say that there are other things that we perhaps as a country and through how we fund some of the big programs need to think about what measures are important and in which properties do we need to do which measures. And if you can do all five, absolutely fantastic. I've done all five in the last two homes I've been in, and they work brilliantly all together.
Yeah.
But I do think from a energy poverty perspective, in many homes would benefit more, and we could deliver more improvements through some of the other measures ahead of doing deep fabric retrofits. And the other challenge with deep fabric retrofits is the skill base and doing it well. And we've seen that in the press recently, and for the last 10 years probably. If it's done badly, it can lead to a lot of problems.
It can, absolutely. I was going to say that. I mean, even with heat pumps, we had some work done here recently, and I had a plumber come in and do some alterations to put to some radiators, and he said that he did the course to get to kind of understand what to do with heat pumps and stuff, but he's never fitted one. He's never done one. He's had it for a couple of years, and you think actually, what skills are out there in the market? You know, is your average plumber geared up to go to somebody's home and service their heat pump, or you know, do work on the heat pump, or even install a heat pump? And that feels like it's also potential, not so much a barrier to people taking it up, because there are companies out there who will install heat pumps for you, but that leaves a bit of a legacy. Perhaps it's a bit of a risk. Some people see it's a bit of a risk, you know, as homeowners. Can I get this maintained?
And that comes back to the point around it's got to be a great experience. People who've got heat pumps need to be loving them and saving money. And it comes back to similar sort of electric car type experience. And that's one of the things that Octopus has been really focused on with our heat pumps. We've redesigned them so they look quite different.
Okay.
I think they look nicer. Some people think they look a bit very different. And it's one of the things, again, Greg Jackson's was thinking about not selling gas at one point, because he looked at his carbon footprint of Octopus's business and said, this is horrific. But instead but people just buy the gas from someone else. So the decision they made was to massively invest in developing and installing heat pumps. So we've developed our own heat pump that is easier to retrofit, lower disruption to retrofit. And there's a £10 million R&D centre in Slough that's doing loads of great work on how to make.
So it's a high temperature heat pump.
It's a high temperature heat pump, yeah.
Right. Okay.
And so there's less upgrades required to the radiators or to the fabric of the home to get a heat pump installed. And then if you do those upgrades, you can lower down the flow temperature and get better performance. But it's also hooked into our tech platform. So Octopus ultimately was started as a tech company, as a software company.
Yeah.
So all of the software, Kraken is the software platform's name that runs all of our customer services, but also all of the smart control, all the devices. And we actually sell that software to other utilities. So more than half the customers, so a quarter of the customers in the UK are Octopus customers, but more than half of the customers are actually being billed and managed through the Kraken platform,
through the Kraken,
the utilities as well, and around the world. So that technology is built into the heat pump such that it can automatically smart control and optimize the home as well. So that's been a big focus of the business is doing that, and then training up people to install. So I think we've got something like 4,000 engineers now who are installing heat pumps, and a lot of that is just upskilling and retraining existing plumbers and gas fitters. That they've got the skill set to practically do the work. They just need to understand how heat pumps work and what the differences are. And actually, heat pumps should be installed in a way that's actually simpler. We don't need TRVs, as many TRVs and as many pumps and as many buffer tanks and things that are going into a lot of heat pump designs. Actually, simpler systems that are well optimized can put actually the ones that perform the best. And actually, there's a whole big learning piece that is coming through now, and the industry is really working out how to deliver fantastic performance out of heat pumps.
Fantastic. That's amazing. So just thinking about outside the home then and how all this ties into a kind of a national picture, you again preach to the converted when it comes to electrifying all of our homes. And alongside that, of course, lots of commercial buildings and properties and stuff are being electrified and, not designing new buildings with gas. So they're all electric. And of course, all of that has to be supplied through our national infrastructure. And I know in some parts of the country, there are restrictions about the size, not domestic scale, but restrictions on the size of PV arrays that can be solar farms and stuff that can be connected to the grid for various reasons. What's Octopus's view on the state of national infrastructure and whether it's ready to accept, a real upsurge in the amount of microgeneration sort of on homes and things?
Look, I think there's definitely the Octopus view is we need to massively upgrade the infrastructure. The
Yeah,
connection queues are massive, and in fact, National Grid's now
right.
stopped connections applications because I think we've had a wind farm in I can't remember where it was now, but that's due to be connected in 2037. That was been ready. It could have been built
Seems
2 or 3 years ago.
crazy, doesn't it? Seems crazy.
So there are big infrastructure upgrades absolutely required, and there's a massive program of upgrades that is planned. But in parallel with that, we also need to be building the infrastructure where we need it and where we've got the resources. So we're moving from a world of having big central coal-fired power plants to offshore wind farms providing a lot of the energy, and a lot of that's now in Scotland, actually,
Yep.
but actually a lot of demand's in London. So
Yep.
there's two things that we think. We need to upgrade a lot of those cables, the wires and connectors, but also we need to be putting energy where it's available and look at where the demand goes. So and the way to that
Yep.
is through that locational pricing. So a great example is, I say, Scotland should have the cheapest energy in Europe. It currently has the most expensive energy in Europe. But if it had the cheapest energy in Europe, just by changing the way the pricing mechanism works, as it does in lots of other countries, then you get data centers being built, you get aluminium smelters being built, you'd get
Yep.
industry moving to those often industrial clusters, Teesside,
Yeah.
Aberdeen,
Yeah.
wherever it may be, Port Talbot, and new electric arc furnaces. You get all those new industries could then use that renewable energy where it's available.
And how
And that
far
means you've
away
got to
are
build
we?
less cables and less wires to do that.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. And how far away are we, do you think, of having a change in the way the pricing structure works in the UK?
The
Feels
consultation on that
like
was launched with a recommendation or an option proposed to move to regional pricing. That is, I think, with the furore over the winter fuel payment, I think that's taking it. They're taking their time in making that decision, is what I'd say. But
right.
that should come through. There's a whole series of market reforms that are proposed that have been proposed by the previous government, and
Yeah.
that are our view absolutely required and would be transformational to the growth of electrification and optimization. I mean, we have to build less infrastructure to deliver what we need, because the market needs to reflect what's going on. At the moment, the market does not
Yeah.
reflect what's actually going
Yeah.
on, and
Yeah.
is actually resulting in renewables. When we've got those renewables are delivering very cheap energy, we're currently paying renewables to turn off because we can't use that energy.
Wow.
So that's the crazy thing that I think will make a big difference. So and you said the other thing you said was perhaps it isn't affecting domestic level. It is affecting domestic level.
Is it? Okay.
So new housing schemes are not getting connections and unable to build homes because they can't get
Right. Okay.
electricity
Collective
connections.
development rather than individual. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I see.
Yeah, and even on some individual developments, they've been built with limited grid infrastructure in place because they're on gas boilers for heating, which means some of the substations and the cables on the homes being built today, 90% of homes still built today are on gas, or 80%, I think, and those homes will not have enough grid infrastructure in the cables in
Yeah.
the ground at the substation for them all to convert to heat pumps. So that those new substations
Feels
going into this year will need upgrading for that whole estate to convert.
That
So
just seems
there
that
is
just
some
seems
crazy
madness.
things going on, and the sooner we have a future home standard that moves everyone to heat pumps, the better. But that is a challenge, that the infrastructure is limited, particularly in areas like the M4 corridor. We've built loads of data centres,
Yeah.
and actually that's not the place to that's
Yeah,
not the best
right in
place
the
for them to
middle,
be.
in inland, right in the middle of the country. So, just thinking about you're talking a lot about the regional electricity or energy availability and demand and things, and as well as cost, we're thinking about carbon emissions associated with our energy. So should we then, most people, and this is not for domestic customers really, but most people who are reporting their carbon emissions are using a national grid average to do that.
Yep.
Some people aren't, but mostly that's what happens. The figure that is published by the government each year. But given what you're saying about kind of regional generation, regional costs, should we be using regional emissions factors? And does that mean that some people actually are going to see their emissions go up? If it just by dint of kind of that difference in reporting, which may also be a driver for thinking, well, I don't really want to locate my new data center here because, not only is it going to cost more, but I'm going to be reporting more carbon as well.
Yep. So the national grid publish the regional carbon intensity, and you can download the data, I think, going back to 2010.
Yeah, and you can get it live, can't you? I think you can
get it live. The
regional
regional carbon intensity on carbonintensity.org.uk.
Yep.
And certainly my view is, you look at Scotland. Scotland has had a carbon intensity of less than 50 for the last 5 or 6 years, whereas parts of the country have been up at 200, 300, 400 still. And the national average is now dropped to, say, last year 125. But that regional difference is massive, and that would encourage investment in areas where you have got low carbon grids. And that the regional pricing and the regional carbon intensity both would drive the right outcomes, and it would incentivize those local areas that have got high carbon intensity to perhaps look at how can they accelerate lower carbon power coming onto their local grids, and the planning permissions for that, the grid infrastructure that enables that. And I think that is a really important way of doing it. The national figure that I think DEFRA publish each year is also 2 years out of date. So it's based on 2 years prior. So it's
it is.
So it's one of the things that looking forward, we should be getting to a very low carbon grid very quickly. But where you're based in the country does make a big difference on carbon intensity, and I think that should be being used. And that's maybe something that I know there's the whole 24/7 energy tag type carbon intensity work that's been done, and that for me makes a lot of sense. You should be looking at we can get the half hourly local regional data
exactly.
And that's what we should be looking at 24/7. And for commercial buildings, we actually have a tariff called Power Match, I think it is, which actually matches your demand of a building or a series of buildings with some wind farms or solar farms, and we try and match that power, and so it provides a display to the buildings to say, actually, we've got excess wind now because it's extremely windy, and therefore can you try and shift your power to match the renewables that are available, and then any outside of that time, we'll try and match with our other renewable sources if we can. But that providing that information to a big corporate or a smaller organisation can be really interesting for them to understand that data and try and work out how do they optimise their equipment. Do they install a battery to try and shift their loads locally? What can they do to actually sync better with the grid and get rewarded for doing that commercially?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's hope that the decision on that consultation is to move to that model. It certainly seems like it's the right thing, and I think if that happens, then our electrical engineers and our infrastructure engineers, utilities engineers are really going to have a rethink about the way they do stuff. So all that is amazingly interesting, and I've got a lot of questions written down which we're not going to have time to go into. So maybe we could just round off with thinking about what's next for Octopus. It really sounds like you're pushing the boundaries and doing. I mean, I'm not hearing anybody else doing this stuff, so that's brilliant. What have you got in the pipeline that you can tell us about, if anything?
So I think that one of the big things is I think we now have the technologies at a price that works, and what we now need to do is spread that around and get mass adoption. So the big focus is really scaling up what we're doing, whether that be EVs, heat pumps, zero bills homes, and making that massive impact. So big focus is how do we really scale that up and make this happen and become the norm and become the optimal solution that we move from the sort of innovators and early adopters into that sort of majority phase where we get on that J curve or S curve and really get mass adoption. So that's the big focus of the business, and that's where Octopus is really well placed to do that. And not just in UK, we're a retailer in France, Germany, Spain, Italy, Japan, New Zealand, Texas, and servicing
Texas. Wow.
Texas, yeah, and servicing customers through our platform in other countries as well. So the potential impact is huge, and there's the huge focus of Octopus is around the end customer service, and what sort of it internally describes what customer love, and making sure that customers love Octopus and love what we're doing. And that's what's enabled Octopus that only started 9 years ago to now be the UK's biggest supplier. And in terms of the impact it can make, I think a lot of the view is we're just getting started. And that's the exciting thing is not just supplying energy, but supplying heat pumps, supplying cars, supplying helping new developers transform that housing stock, and really making a really positive image for this new, cleaner, cheaper future that is available, and that hopefully will drive really massive adoption. So there's a lot of exciting products we're working on, lots of exciting sort of customer propositions, and the level of the one thing that's been astounding to me is the pace at which certain things happen at Octopus. Is just there's a weekly rhythm rather than a monthly rhythm, which most businesses run on. And that weekly rhythm is a very positive energy and a very sort of driven, relentless drive to what we get done this week, not what we've done this month or this year. And as a result, it's a very iterative, very fast moving agenda, and therefore that enables things to happen quickly. And that fundamentally that's what's got to happen. We've got to get stuff done at a much quicker pace.
You're so right. You know,
and we're facing a lot of headwinds around the world.
That's what I was going to say. Actually, you're exactly right. With developments elsewhere in the world, you know, you feel like you've kind of got to double down and really make the effort to make an impact. Well, Nigel, that has been an amazing conversation. I think people are going to be really interested to hear about all the work that Octopus are doing, all the great stuff that's coming down the track. And maybe they'll even go back and find your Fabric Fifth article and and take a little read of that, because that turns the conventional wisdom on its head, which is brilliant. Nigel, thank you so much for joining me on Carbon Clarity.
Been great to be with you, Kevin. Thanks a lot. Cheers, bye.